Well, howdy there, folks. We're here in the United We Strike Marathon, happily trying to bring some information to our fellow freedom-seeking fighters all over the world. And, we're doing the best we can here to do our share. So today I have a friend of mine, Gary, who's on the front line fighting for his right to be a free man, and I've been, assisting him the best way I can. So we want to talk today about basically racketeering, which is if you really, and we're going to go through the term. If you look at the meaning of racketeering, it's exactly what's going on in this court systems. All the ingredients that they apply to get you to comply is nothing more than racketeering. It's just that when they do the racketeering, of course they make it look pretty and all, and then they try to get us to think that it's something else, something they call justice. But their justice in reality is just a version of racketeering when you submit yourself to their system. And I mean, I know it's a lot to cover in 1 hour, but we're going to try to do the best we can, and we're going to try to basically just stick to terms that are applicable. Now, I mean, not just here in the states in North America, but actually it applies all over the world because all the supposed nations are in fact corporations, and they all operate under the quote unquote justice system, which really just means just our system, just us. so so what we need to do is begin to become a little familiar with some of these terms and see if we can basically defend ourselves from what's going on. So let me introduce Gary here and let him tell you a little bit about himself and just generally speaking about the case that brought you to that situation Thursday without naming the members of your case, because we don't need to get too personal about your particular case, but just the general points of it and the type of court where you initiated or where this case was initiated against you.
Okay. Well, I'm from North Carolina, and so we're dealing with the North Carolina state system. And I just got convicted in district court for making harassing phone calls to my brother. Um, my father died about a year ago, and my brother is the executor of the will. And he is supposed to be selling my dad's house, but what he's actually done is let his son move into the house, and he hasn't moved to sell the house so we can split the funds on the house. And so out of frustration of him never calling me back, I made some silly calls to him, none of them really threatening, but just acting silly towards him. And he brought these harassing phone call charges against me. And so I go to my front door one day, and there's two police officers there, and they asked me if I was Gary Allen, and I told them yes, and they told me that I was under arrest for making harassing phone calls. And so they handcuffed me and put me in the car, and after they put me in the car, they actually looked up the warrant and told me that there were harassing phone calls coming out of Rowan County. And so at the time, I really didn't have any idea what it was about. So I ended up spending 7.5 hours in jail and ended up having to bail out on a $500 bond. And so after all that, I figured out, what was going on. And at that time is when I contacted you. And it's been an interesting trip ever since then.
Yeah, so just to clarify the type of court that this is, at least here in the state, and it's so critical that people really, wherever you're at, you become familiar with your courts, because most of the courts that you're going to be drug into are not courts the way people think about it. You can go to these courts, and I mean Gary here will testify to it, and your argument is irrelevant. You are guilty before you even enter the courtroom. Okay, they already determine your guilt because the very charge is guilt. And a lot of these courts actually operate like military courts. So wherever you happen to be living, look up the codes that relate to military courts. Here in the States, if you look up the military courts, you will see that they operate exactly like most of the courts operate. Okay, so here in the States, it's the third court from the top where you want to be. They have a Supreme Court, they have an appellate court, and then they have a superior court. They call it different names, but in fact, it's a superior court because it means it's superior to all the other courts. That's what it means. And in that court, it becomes superior only when the decisions that are made in that court are made under a jury of your peers. Okay? But when you enter these courts, even though you enter the superior court, which is where you want to be, they always try to get you to accept something other than what you want. And the peers that they try to give you are basically servants of the state, which creates a conflict of interest if the state is a participant in your case. How can you have a servant of the master being on the same jury? There's actually a maxim of law against that point. But anyway, in Gary's situation, he entered this this court, and right off the bat, he was guilty, and he went there for the purpose of deciding whether he was going to have either appointed counsel or take on his own counsel. That's why he went there under the impression. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, they sprung the idea that they were going to have a bench trial that day. And of course, a bench trial is not a trial at all because you have an agent of the state, okay, pretending to be neutral when the state itself is bringing you the charges, which is no different than a military court. All the participants in the court are part of the military. So there is no such thing as a fair trial in a military type of setup, and they can convict you at will because you're already guilty. You have to prove your innocence. So I would like Gary to kind of give you an idea of what went on in this supposedly fair court hearing, basically from the moment that he walked in. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, so you're talking about the trial I had on Thursday?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Okay. So what they do is they call roll, and when they call roll, they tell you to answer one of three ways. You're guilty, you're not guilty, or they want you to give your lawyer's name. And so when they asked me that question, I had Burt and I had submitted demands from the previous court that should have been addressed. And so I stood up and said, there are demands put forth in this matter, and this case cannot move forward until these demands are addressed. And the judge looks at the clerk and says, put him down as not guilty, no lawyer. And I said, I take exception to that. I did not enter a plea. And she just moved on. She didn't pay me any attention at all. And so she said later on they called me up and asked me. They started with the lawyer bit, whether I wanted a lawyer or whether I was going to represent myself or whether I wanted a state appointed lawyer. And essentially that's a trap to get you to admit that they have authority over you. So the way I responded was, for the record, in all due respect, I wish to remain silent. And she looks at the clerk and says, okay, put him down as he's exercising his right to remain silent, and we're going to have a trial today. And we're going to set this up for trial a little later this morning. And I said, well, my demands have not been addressed. And she looked at me and says, you didn't follow correct criminal procedure, so therefore we don't have to address your demands. And so at that time, I knew that I was in a pickle. So, out of thinking what I do, because I've been in this situation before, that they're going to find you guilty and then they're going to put you in jail. And I was going to be stuck in a town outside of my hometown, and I was worried about not being able to get out of jail. So I went to, when we took a break, I went over to the bail bondsman and I set up an agreement with them that if I got put in jail, they'd come and get me out. And so, of course, we went to trial later that morning, and it was a kangaroo trial. The judge didn't let me finish cross-examining my brother. She stepped in middle of the way and stopped me from questioning and told my brother to step down. And then she asked me if I wanted to get up and defend or say anything about my situation, which I did. And then when I was explaining the situation to them, the DA objected and said that the matters that I were bringing up were irrelevant, and the judge held up the objection, and then they asked me to step down. So essentially, I wasn't given the chance to cross-examine my brother, or I wasn't given the chance to fully explain my situation when I was given the stand. So they found me guilty. She gave me a 45-day suspended sentence, and then she said that it would be suspended as long as I got a psychological evaluation within the next 30 days. And then she said she was going to give me a 3-day special probation period. And I said, well, could you please describe what the special probation period is? And she says, oh, that's 3 days in jail for 3 days out of the 45 days suspended. So at that time, I said, well, I would like to appeal this matter. And she says, okay, appeal is noted. I'm going to put you under $2,000 bond. Bailiff, come take Mr. Allen and put him in jail until he pays his bond. So fortunately, I had worked out the deal with the bondsman, and I ended up only being in jail for like 2.5 hours. But I felt pretty, I felt like I'd been racketeered.
So yeah, let's kind of review this term racketeering. It says racketeer. What's a racketeer? It's a person who makes money by violations of the penal law. Okay, now of course, the penal law, that has a lot of meanings in itself. But then it says whose violations are basically accompanied by violence. You know? So when you go to court, they definitely exercise violence on you if you don't do what they say. So racketeering means an organized conspiracy to commit the crimes of extortion or coercion, or attempts to commit extortion or coercion. And that's exactly what these people do. I mean, that's exactly what they did to Gary here. They extorted submission from him, not by law, not by any kind of fairness, just simply because they had the power, the muscle to do it. That's the definition of coercion. Okay? Then it says, from the standpoint of extortion, it is the obtaining of money or property from another. And then it says, with his consent, induced by the wrongful use of force or fear. So they extort on you by taking your consent through wrongful use of force and fear. And everything they do is by fear. I mean, most of it is fear. I mean, Gary can testify how he's supposedly in front of this judge who's supposed to be neutral, while at the same time he's got this armed sheriff's agent hovering around him, telling him, oh, move that way, stay in front of the table, trying to throw him off by intimidating him, how are you supposed to even make your argument when you have all these buzzers going around you, scaring you, right, Gary? And that's
A-
insane.
Absolutely. I mean, the I tried to serve the DA with the demands that we were going to put forth that day, and I tried to hand it to the bailiff. I said, "Please hand these to the DA," and he says, "No, I'm not going to do it." And I says, "Your Honor, could you please let the bailiff serve these papers on the DA?" And she looked at me like I was crazy and didn't respond. So, and then I tried to hand the papers to the DA, and so I had to step out from behind the table, and the bailiff runs over there and says, "Stay behind the table, stay behind the table. You can't move but from behind the table." So I couldn't even get over to her table to hand her the demands that we were going to put forth that day. And so they wouldn't even take the demands in the courtroom, which they're supposed to do legally. And the way they get away with all this is that this is not a court of record. There's no record of anything that is done in the courtroom, so they can essentially do anything they want to in there with you, and there's no record of it. So it's going to be your word against theirs, and that's what's so unfair about it. But in district court, it's just a show trial anyway. So
Yeah, and that's why it's important for you to know the type of court that you're in, because if you're in the wrong court, I mean, if you're in a Walmart court and you're trying to speak something other than Walmart regulations, they're going to look at you like you're nuts. So they were looking at Gary like he's crazy because nothing that he's going to say in this court really matters, you know? So the best that you can do is make your own record, since they don't have a record, by giving them paperwork and that they acknowledge that they received. And now another thing that we haven't done in this particular case, which I'm doing in other cases, especially when it's not a court of record, is you can actually send some of your paperwork to the supposed judge via certified mail. And then now the judge cannot say that he has not received your paperwork. Okay?
well,
So you want to say something about that?
well, yes. I mean, the we had filed these demands with the clerk, so the demands were actually in the file. They
Mhm.
just so he had access. Well, it was her. She had access to the demands, but she didn't even open the folder. She didn't even take the time to look at any of the files in the folder. So it's really all those demands. They didn't even pay any attention to them or read them.
Right, because when you go to this court, they just want to move your case fast because they're making money by the minute. And when you go in there and you start getting in their way, that upsets them because they have to make a certain amount of money, otherwise that court will shut down. Okay? And actually that's what's happening across the states. Crime is actually going down. There's less crime, and all these municipalities are desperate to create crimes, and now they're going after people hard for stupid things. I mean, I just heard today that in Florida, they're they passed some kind of a law. I need to double check it. I'm not sure if it's true. Something about if you are convicted of theft 3 times, they have the right or the option to put you in jail for life. So that doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to double check that. But that's actually what they're doing now. They're changing the punishments to stupid violations so they can keep you in there longer and they can take your money and take your freedom and everything away from you, your property, the whole 9 yards. Because if you're in jail and you cannot pay your bills, whatever it is that you had, it's going to be taken away from you. And it goes right back into the system to be recycled for their own benefit. So so it's very important to understand the type of courts that you're in. Now, moving ahead um, with this thing on racketeering, it says the fear which constitutes the legally necessary element in extortion is induced by oral or written threats to do an unlawful injury to the property of the threatened person by means of blah blah blah, kidnap, kill, injury, whatever it is that they use. And property people always forget that the most important piece of property that you have is your rights. If you do not have rights, no physical property matters because it can be taken away from you if you don't have rights. So the main point here is that when you go to these lower courts, always keep in mind that whatever happens in that lower court, you can appeal it to a higher court. And when you appeal it to the higher court, you want to bring the records that you yourself entered into the record on your own. So you always have to serve these people correctly so that you can then move that up to the higher court. And now you have evidence that these people actually committed racketeering against you. And they did not give you due process of law. That's another important term that people need to comprehend. I'll let you have the last word there, Gary. Because we're only going to be on for a half hour.
Right. Yes. So we got like 2 minutes, but
Yeah.
the point that we haven't brought up is that we actually sued the county, and we have a civil suit against the county that brought these charges against me, and they have already acquiesced on my claim against them. So essentially, we have won a default against the county with our counterclaim, and now it's just a matter of going to court determining what my damages are going to be. So that's an important point, is that when you get arrested and you have not done anything wrong, you can file a counterclaim and hold these people personally accountable for the damages that they have done to you.
Exactly. So we have this suit already ahead of time, and apparently this judge lady did not, or at least she appeared like she was ignorant of the fact that we have this suit going against them, and they proceeded as though they didn't know what was going on. So that's to their detriment, you know.
Well, that's what's so cool about the process I'm learning with you, is that you actually have a way to defend yourself against these racketeers. There's a lot to learn. I mean, we've gone through a lot of statutes, and I've learned a tremendous amount going through this process, and I find it really well worth my time to do so, because it just gives you a sense of strength and to feel that you have a way to fight back against these people.
Yeah. So that's I couldn't say it any other way. I mean, that's what we have to do. Knowledge is power, and they take advantage of us because 99% of the people are completely ignorant about everything. People live in a make-believe world, and now if you look at TV, at least here in the States, everything is this stupid reality shows, and they're trying to get people to believe that that's how most people live. They got to put a bunch of idiots on TV, and they call it reality show, and that's life. That's the life. They're replacing education with stupidity. But anyway, thanks for everybody for listening, and thanks to all of you guys, Detlev, for making all this possible.
Well, Bert, I just learned we still have the option to have the next 30 minutes available for you. Now this is a surprise, but we take the surprise, don't we? Yeah, if you want to. I mean, you can go on, because we have had a slight change in program. So because there was a round table planned for right now, and this has been postponed half an hour, and we include everybody, so we don't have two round tables. So if you're willing and if you want to, just go ahead with your interesting conversation.
Oh, okay, cool. Because that's actually what we were talking about. So I was under the impression we were going to be under, and
me too. But that's life, isn't it?
Yeah, life is like that, and we do the best we can with it. So okay, cool. So that's excellent. So yeah. So what we're trying to say is that it's important that you have a goal in your plan when you're going after these people. Now, when you hire an attorney, and Gary can testify to this because he has dealt with attorneys. When the state comes after you with their charges, their accusations, they're basically demanding a duty from you. Okay, it's like you are, let's say you're in the military, you're a private or a sergeant or something in the military, and by being in the military, you have a duty to abide by all the regulations, regardless of how stupid they are. You have to follow the regulations, right? Like saluting and standing at attention and all this ridiculous stuff. Uh, it's the same thing in the body politics, because the thing that people don't realize is that everything in the so-called government world, it's all politics. So when they are coming after you for violating a regulation, it's in fact a political persecution. Okay? Because they're enforcing upon you a political regulation that some bunch of clowns made up somewhere. Okay? Anyone can create law, and they call their regulations law, but in reality, they're ordinances. That's the English term for it. So all these terms that I'm using, you can pretty much interpret or translate to any language, and they're going to mean the same thing. So every political regulation is in fact an ordinance, okay? And who is liable for those ordinances? The people that are members of the body politic. So it could be like Walmart or McDonald's. They create a regulation. So who is bound by the regulation? Of course, their employees. I mean, you can't be walking down the street and all of a sudden the manager from Walmart comes running out and says, hey, I need you to pick up that trash right there by the sidewalk. And you're like, are you nuts? He says, yeah, we have a regulation that says when you walk within 10 feet of trash, you're supposed to pick it up. And you're like, but I'm not on duty. I'm not employed by your company. And then he goes, oh, okay, sorry. And then you just keep going down the road. Well, this is the same thing when a cop comes up to you and tries to enforce some kind of regulation. He's pretending that you're on duty. And then he uses, of course, he doesn't use logic or any kind of evidence. He just uses intimidation, coercion to push you into the racket, which is the legal system. And then through fear, he gives you a summons to go to the racketeering court. And then the racket continues and it intensifies, because once you get in there, you're in fear of going to their prison for who knows how long, and your whole life will be taken away from you. I mean, that is the most highest degree of racketeering that you can be under. I mean, they can take your whole everything that is in your life that's important to you away from you, based on what? On an assumption that you are on duty. I want you to elaborate on that, Gary.
I think that is one of the most important points, is that essentially you're acting as a state employee when you walk into that courtroom, and they're assuming that you're an employee of the state. And what you have to do is keep from walking into that trap. And that's very hard to do, because everything set up in that courtroom is to get you to fall into those pitfalls. And I don't think I've been successful at getting out of there clean yet, without somehow stepping in one of their traps. But I mean, I think an important point is that people have a lot more rights than they realize, and that if you learn your statutes and they don't follow their own statutes. They break their own statutes over and over and over. And once you learn them, you can call them on it. And that is one of the strongest things that I've learned, is that you can use their laws against them. And because they don't know their laws. They don't know their statutes. The police get told to do something, they go do it. They don't understand what they're doing. They just know somebody higher than them told them to do what they're supposed to do, and they go off and do it. And it's like you were saying to me, when they served that warrant on me, they didn't have anybody named on that warrant to come and arrest me. So it was like it was like you putting a warrant up on your apartment door, and somebody walks by, oh, there's a warrant for Gary. I think I'll go serve it on him. And so the policeman takes it off the door and he goes and arrests me. Well, now he's just kidnapped me. He doesn't have the authority to take me to jail. He wasn't directed personally to go do anything. So he's voluntarily taken it on himself to come and kidnap me. And that's essentially the counterclaim we filed was for kidnapping. And so it's just an important thing to realize that you're an state employee, and you got to realize that you're not a state employee and that you're not on duty and that you have no duty to them at all. It's just and the fear that's instilled in you that you feel like you do.
Exactly. I mean, and that's how everything is motivated. I mean, anybody's heart will jump if they get an invitation to go to court. Okay. Now, Gary here is it's he's actually beginning to look at this thing as amusement, in a way, because he's learning how to play within the game. But my goal for myself and for everyone that I'm trying to help is that whenever these people come after you, don't get scared. Do just the opposite. Get a big smile across your face and say, hey, all right, now I get to use all this stuff against them, and I'm going to try to get money off these people,
And that's, I mean, that's an important point. Is they're giving you a money making opportunity. It's you can hold them personally liable for the actions that they do against you. And to me, that's one of the coolest things to learn is that policeman that came and arrested me, he is personally responsible. Himself personally is responsible for the actions that he took against me. And that's, most people don't realize that these people are committing crimes and they don't even realize they're committing crimes.
Yeah, and again, it all comes down to ignorance. It's like when a cop comes over and tries to do anything to you, and I'm using cops only because they're the front lines, people that we mostly see. And I don't want to sound negative because there's a lot of cops out there that have a big heart. It's just that a lot of them are working without knowledge of the law. But any state official that comes after you, if you ask them for the source of their authority, they're going to mention some kind of a statute, okay, something written on paper. How can something written on a piece of paper give anybody authority to do anything? I mean, I can write anything on a piece of paper and say, hey, go cut that guy's head off, and it's just a written piece of paper. You're gonna follow that? Of course not. Anything that you do, especially if it's going to involve violating someone's right, you need to question yourself before you exercise it. So any government official that is blindly doing something without considering your rights, he's taking a personal liability, and that includes anyone. It could be a judge, a magistrate, whatever. They're all personally liable when they exercise any kind of force outside of their office. Okay, and that thing about duty is really important. And like I said, this goes across the entire world, because those corporate officers, they in fact have an undeniable duty to do whatever it is that their office says they're supposed to do. And the truth is, all government so-called officials, they all work for some kind of a corporation, some kind of a fictional entity. They all have a duty to uphold the law. But the problem is that people don't know what the law is. People think that the law is what those clowns in the dark room somewhere called legislative acts put together. That's not the law. The law has existed way before any of those people were born. Like here in the States, the law has existed way before the United States was ever created. And in the process of creating the United States, they violated all kinds of laws. Like the natives who lived here, they were raped, tortured, killed, blah, 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 in order to establish this supposedly lawful country, lawful nation. The same thing has been done across the world, So man's law is not the law. The law are those principles of law that we can associate with God, or universal principles. I mean, we all know that you cannot steal something from someone. We all know that you cannot go around killing just for the hell of it. We know that we have to respect each other. We know all these things. These are all principles of law that you don't need to have it written down anywhere, and we don't follow it. And then the weakest point in humans is that they need to be told what the law is, and that's the biggest flaw right there. If people are not able to take responsibility for the law themselves, which they already know what the law is because it's inherent in people, they're being irresponsible. And when you cannot be responsible for the law, well, guess what? All those people for the government are going to teach you what the law is because you're ignorant of the law. And that's the process that we're in right now, is enforcing our right to the law, because we have a right to have access to the law. And that's the biggest thing that I would say that, well, I can let Gary speak for himself about what he's learning about the true law is supposed to be.
Well, the true law is the law that you bring in. I mean, is you establish your law. When you walk into that courtroom, it is your law that is under you. You are under the control of your own law. You're not. They're not. Their laws do not control you. Or I don't know if I said that correctly. Their statutes or their corporate law has really nothing to do with you as a free living person or man, free living man. And that's what you got to understand, is that you are under God's law. And those laws are very simple and straightforward. And they're they in North Carolina, they have over 3,000 statues. How in the world is a human being supposed to walk around and know the 3,000 statutes that he cannot break? I mean, are we all supposed to walk around with a master's degree in law? It's ridiculous. I mean, it's just ridiculous from the standpoint that you're supposed to understand 3,000 laws or 3,000.
Yeah, and of course that's their law that they're talking about, right? That's not our law. That's their law. So I just put in here in the chat so that Detlev can follow along. Here's a really interesting legal court definition of evil. Okay, the word evil. I mean, everybody has this idea of what evil is, but what does evil really mean when you're in court? Okay, and it says, it is an evil within that either means or end of conspiracy must be evil. Now, this kind of sounds complicated, but basically, evil means to frustrate or impede a government function. So if you get in the way of a government function, that is evil. Okay? Now, what type of function? Well, whether that function is performed under a constitutional or unconstitutional law. So if you live in whatever country or nation and you violate one of their laws, whether that law is in fact quote unquote constitutional or not, your act is evil. Now that rule or regulation might be evil in your mind, but if you violate it, you're more evil than that law. This is like insanity, that's what people.
If you don't obey the government in any way they tell you to, then you're an evil person, or you're.
Yes. So you can see why when you obstruct the government, you are already guilty because you're evil. Okay. You're some kind of evil little monster that they're dragging into court and say, you little devil, you violated our regulation. How dare you? Now prove that we shouldn't cut your head off. I mean, that's basically what's going on in court. And you have to prove, no, I deserve to keep my head, Your Honor. Well, we don't believe you. And then you start trying to give your evidence. We don't want your evidence. That's irrelevant. But, sir, be quiet or I'll hold you in contempt of court. Your Honor, I object. Put him in the cooler there for a couple of hours. that's exactly what they do. You start objecting, and they'll throw you in court. I mean, in their little jail there that they have behind one of those little doors that they don't look like doors in the courtroom. You look at some of these courtrooms, and the wall, it just looks like a continuous wall, but actually parts of that wall are hidden doors, huh, Gary?
That's exactly right. They took me back there and put me in the holding cell so I wouldn't disrupt the court anymore.
Exactly. Exactly. So the most important thing in all this is that we need to really get a grip on the concepts of freedom. I have some other people that I'm helping, and they're really getting a good grip on the concept, because once you have the concept of freedom, it is easy for you to respond. Now, here's another very important point when you are dealing with these racketeers. So I cannot think of any better way to describe them. They always try to engage you in conversation, and that's actually the worst thing that you can do. Now, everybody here in the States have heard that line that you have the right to remain silent. Well, for God's sakes, exercise it. It's much better to be silent and have them make up interpretations of your silence than for you to say something that they can directly use against you. Okay? And there's a maxim of law. That's something that everybody really needs to learn, is the maxims of law. The maxims of law are international. Okay, they are not specific to any country or nation. They're international. So there's a maxim of law that says your words or your testimony overrides everything else. That's why you need to keep your mouth closed when you're in court, because at the beginning of court, what do they tell you before they even call you up, Gary?
Say that again now.
What is it that they ask you when at the beginning of court? Don't they tell you that you have the right to remain silent?
Oh, right. Yes. She read me my Miranda rights.
And then she proceeded to ask you questions, right?
That's right. Immediately after that, they started asking questions.
I mean, that's insane, and people don't listen.
And that's another important point, is that it's like you said, they put the horse before the cart. Is they won't go immediately to the evidence, where you have to get them to show you that they have jurisdiction over you. So you don't want to be addressing the evidence right when you go to court. You want to address the fact they really don't have any jurisdiction over you. And man, they want to avoid that like nothing. I mean, that's why they don't want to look at the demands, because they don't have authority over you, and they're not going to acknowledge that they don't have authority over you.
Right.
They're force and intimidation to make you think they have authority over you, and they're just ignore your rights.
Yeah. Now, I love using the example of like McDonald's. I mean, again, to my original example, you're walking down the sidewalk, and the manager comes out and says, "I need you to pick up that trash." And you give him the middle finger, and you keep walking down the sidewalk. Well, he'll call some of his security guards, and they'll go and they'll arrest you. They'll arrest you, and they give you 2 violations. One for giving the middle finger to the manager, and the second for refusing to pick up the trash. Okay? Then they drag you into the back kitchen, and they make you go before another manager who acts as judge. Okay? And they say, "How do you plead? Would you like one of our employees to represent you in this matter?" And you're like, "Are you people nuts?" It's like, "Okay, we're gonna take that." I say, "Yes, all right, we'll assign him a public McDonald's defender," and then the trial begins. And they won't let you get out unless you either pay a bond, or they keep you in the cooler until it's time for your little McDonald's trial. Okay? And when the trial begins, all they're going to talk about is the fact that you gave the finger to the manager, and that you refused to pick up the trash, and you violated their regulations. The fact that you were not on McDonald's duty will never come up in the trial. They
and that,
totally bypass that very important point.
that's right. So let's talk about this waiver of counsel that they wanted me to sign. They drag you into court, and then they ask you whether you want a lawyer or whether you're going to hire your own lawyer or whether you want to apply for a state appointed lawyer. So if you I told them that I didn't know at that time how I wanted to do it, and they says, well, you need to sign this waiver. So if you're not indigent, you need to sign this waiver form. And I told them, well, I'd like to have a copy of that in 10 days to read it before I signed it. And so when I brought it home and actually read it, I was amazed to find what it actually said. So I'm going to read this one paragraph for y'all. As an undersigned party in this action, I freely and voluntarily declare that I have been fully informed of the charges against me, the nature of and the statutory punishment for each such charge, and the nature of the proceedings against me, that I have been advised of my right to have counsel assigned to me and to assist me, and my right to have the assistance of the counsel is defending against these charges or handling in these proceedings. And I fully understand and appreciate the consequences of my decision to waive the right to assign counsel and the right to assistance of a counsel. I freely and voluntarily knowingly declare, and then they have you to sign. So essentially what they are getting you to say is that you understand completely the laws that are being brought forth against you, that you understand all the court proceedings, and they have taken the time to fully inform you on those procedures and the nature of the charges against you, which none of it is actually true. They read the statutory charge against you, and that's all they do to explain the charge against you. They don't explain any of the nature of the statutory punishment except what the maximum
Jail time.
Jail time could be, and they don't describe the nature of the proceedings against you at all. And here you're supposed to sign and saying that you understand the nature of these proceedings against you. And the thing is how can anyone know what the judge is thinking in his mind? How can I know what the court is thinking? How am I know what the procedures are going to be brought against me are? There's no way to know.
Yeah, so bringing it back to the McDonald's example, you're in the back of the kitchen, and they give you this paper to sign that says you understand the charges against you, which basically saying, okay, I accept that your charges are valid against me. Even though I'm not a McDonald's employee, I'm going to honor your charges as though I was an employee of McDonald's. And then they proceed. So they never have to address the fact that you are not an employee of McDonald's.
That's right. And when you sign this form, you're actually consenting that you are an employee. And now you're under their law. And they won't let you out. They tried to get me to sign this thing 3 different times, and I refused to sign it each time, but they still proceeded as if I did sign it.
Yeah, so he never consented to any of their BS. And then if you bring in the attorney can be viewed as a subcontractor of McDonald's. And his job is to move you through the McDonald's system. That's it. That's the only way he can help you. He cannot, you start talking to him, wait a minute, but I'm not an employee of McDonald's. I was just walking, and then the attorney will look at you like, are you nuts? I'm here to help you through the McDonald's system. Are you mentally incompetent? They'll look at you like you're mentally incompetent. But they're not.
So, I mean, it's a kangaroo court from the very beginning. I mean, there's no pretense of what they're doing if you actually look at it. I mean, they tell you an open view what they're doing to you. It's just most of us don't take the time to actually look at what they're doing to us. We just go in there with assumptions and think that the system is benevolent and not malevolent. And
exactly.
It is so malevolent. It's unreal.
Yeah, so it's very important that we understand, what is law, what is duty, and what is racketeering, because that's what these people are doing. They're just racketeering the heck out of the rest of us, and we're allowing it because we're ignorant. We don't know any better about what's going on, and I mean, we're still learning. We're still trying to get past all the obstacles that they have. But here's the bright side of all this: is their trickery and magic is limited. It all fits into a bag. It's probably a very big bag, but it's limited. So once you learn some of the basics of their trickery and magic, and you understand your position of law, which is the same and it's eternal, you will be able to beat them eventually, because they can only beat you with yourself. They basically take your hand and they start slapping you with your own hand. That's really how their system works. So if we refuse to use our own hand, and then they grab our hand and start slapping us with our hand, and we have evidence of that, now we can go after them in the proper court. So learning the proper court is invaluable, because being in front of a supposed judge who gets to decide on the law and gets to decide on what is fact and what is not, I mean, you already lost before you got in there.
Well, that's the thing people need to understand, is that in North Carolina, when you're in district court, there's no record. So everything you're going to do there is going to be between you and the judge, and there's going to be no, unless you have witnesses there that can back you up. But now we're going to be in a court of record, and now they have to behave themselves on a much more defined scale, because everything will be on record, and any malfeasance that they do will be in the record, and so you can hold them responsible at that point.
Okay, so we're gonna have to end it here because our time's running out. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much, Detlev, for allowing this to happen. Thanks a lot to Karen for making all of this possible, and hopefully we'll be able to free some minds, help people unplug from this crazy matrix that they're trying to get us to live in.
So your website is onlyfreemen, right, .com?
Yeah, only www.onlyfreeman.com, and then Do Not Consent 83 is my YouTube channel, and you have a channel too, right, Gary?
Yes, I have 911truthnc.org is my YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm. So, and Gary's got a lot of people on his channel. So we're doing our share to try to get the information out and educate people. So anyway, God bless everybody, and remember what evil is. Do not do evil to the government, or they will come after you.
Yeah, thanks, Burt, for your insight, and thanks, Gary, for being on the show. Yeah, we will listen to a United We Strike song by Tommy Truther now during the break, and during the break we will also make a shift to Ireland. The production will continue, and thanks a lot for listening in our United We Strike radio marathon today, June 8th, 2013, and next hour will be our round table, so it's going to be very interesting, so stay tuned, and we will see you after the break.
Join UnitedWeStrike.com radio on the second Saturday of every month for our live international radio marathon. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why.